Hello, and welcome to the vocabulary lesson for the conversation called dating. Now, this is a conversation Joe and I were having about some of our friends and the different dates that they have gone on. So let's begin. Joe starts out by saying, "Hey, I ran into my friend Jackie today downtown." Now, hey, that's just kind of a filler word here. It doesn't really mean anything. He's just trying to get my attention. It's just something you can say at the beginning of a sentence. So he's saying, "Hey, I ran into my friend Jackie today downtown." Ran into. Now that's an idiom. And what he's saying here is, "Hey, I saw my friend Jackie by surprise today." Or, "I unexpectedly saw my friend." Or, "I wasn't expecting to see her." Ran into. An example of this would be, one time I was at a street festival here in San Francisco and ran into a friend who I wasn't even expecting to be there. Ran into. Then I go on to say, "Hey, you used to work with her, right?" So I'm saying, "Hey, you used to work with her, didn't you?" And then Joe says, Yeah. I don't think you've met her yet, but, So he's saying, yeah. Yeah is just slang or informal or casual for yes. You won't really see that in written English, but you will definitely hear it in conversational English. So he's saying, yeah, I don't think you've met my friend Jackie. Met as in, I don't think you've been introduced to her. And then I go on to say, yeah, I can't believe, or I'm surprised. I haven't met her actually. But now actually here is just kind of a filler word. It doesn't really mean that much. Then Joe goes on to say, yeah, I don't see her that often. Often meaning much. He's saying, I don't see her that often. I don't see her that much. I guess, or I think. And then I say, oh. And then Joe goes on to say, one of the reasons I don't see her that often, or I don't see her that much, is because she's been really busy. Really, or very busy. Because she's in a new relationship, she said. So, in a new relationship, or that could also mean his friend Jackie, she's just started dating someone. She's in this new relationship. And I say, oh, like, wow, really? Then Joe says, yeah, you should have seen her. It was it was so cute to see her. She was like bursting at the seams. She was so happy. Like in this situation, I've mentioned this in other lessons. It's just a filler word. Doesn't really mean anything. So, she was like bursting at the seams. Now, bursting at the seams, that's an idiom. Basically, it's saying she was very excited. She was so happy. bursting at the seams. An example of bursting at the seams would be, when I first met Joe, 10 months ago on this day actually, the 21st, I felt so excited and happy. I was bursting at the seams. Then I just laugh because I can imagine his friend Jackie even though I haven't met her, I can just picture this woman who's, as he's describing, she's so cute. She's just bursting at the seams. She's so happy because she's in this new relationship. Okay, moving on then, Joe says, because I guess, or he's saying, I think, I guess, the relationship is going really well. Or it's going very well. So, and then I say, oh, that's good. And Joe says, yeah, I'm really happy to see it too, because I know she's been really looking for someone. Now, looking for someone, that's an idiom. And what he's basically saying is she's been trying to find someone to date. She's been trying to find someone. An example of looking for someone would be, my friend Tina is always looking for someone, but she can never seem to meet someone she likes. Looking for someone. So yeah, Joe is talking about how happy he is to see his friend so happy, because she's been looking for someone. She's been trying to find someone to date. And he goes on to say, and, she'd been doing the online dating thing for, I don't know, over a year. So he's saying she'd been meeting people or trying to date people online or from the internet. And she'd been doing this for over a year, for more than a year. And he goes on to say, and I mean, or what I'm trying to say, it seemed like she wasn't having a lot of luck with it. So he's saying she wasn't having a lot of luck. She wasn't finding men to date. She just wasn't having very good luck with it. And then I go on to say, oh, really? And Joe says, yeah. And then I say, well, it's good she's finally found someone that she's compatible with. Compatible. So what I'm saying is, it's good she's finally found someone she gets along with. And then Joe says, yeah, I remember when she first started out, she told me about this one guy she met and he was a total loser. So he's saying, I remember when she first started out dating, she told me about this one guy. Guy is slang for man. So he's saying, she told me about this one man she met and he was a total loser. A total loser just simply means not a good person to date, because maybe the guy is unsuccessful, or maybe he doesn't have a job, or maybe he's mean to his mother, or maybe he's not well educated. He doesn't have a good education. Total loser. An example of total loser would be, my mom likes to remind me of how I dated total losers in high school. She thinks it's because I wanted to try and change them into better guys. Total loser. So then Joe goes on to say, I mean, one thing that I remember she said was that he asked her to go out to this nice restaurant. So he's saying, she's talking about, his friend Jackie is talking about this guy when she first started doing the dating online or on the internet. this first guy she meets, he asks her to go to this nice restaurant. To this really expensive restaurant is basically what that means. Nice restaurant. And then Joe goes on to say, and she wasn't planning on having him pay for the date. So he's saying that Jackie, his friend, wasn't thinking that this guy would pay for her date. I think in America nowadays, it's not expected for a guy to pay for the first date. But usually, or I would say most of the time, it does still happen. So she's not thinking he's definitely going to pay for the date. So then Joe goes on to say, she was like, okay, well, I have money just in case. And he made her pay for the whole date. So Jackie wasn't planning on this guy paying for her date. She wasn't thinking he would pay for it. She had money just in case. She had money just to be sure. Just to be sure in case he didn't pay. And then Joe is saying, but he did. He ended up making her pay for the whole date, for everything. So I just laugh and say, oh my God, I can't believe it. And Joe says, I know, what the... And he laughs. So that was really, a bad introduction. So what he's saying is, that was really a bad first meeting. So Jackie, his friend Jackie, this was a bad first meeting for her. A bad first meeting with this guy. Because he made her pay for the whole date. Like I said, even though it's not expected in American culture anymore, it's just nice on the first date if a guy pays. Then I just laugh, agreeing it was a bad introduction. And Joe goes on to say, to that guy and to the online dating world. So he's saying that was a bad introduction to this guy and to the online dating world. So here, bad introduction to the online dating world. Introduction would just mean it was a bad start to the dating world. It was a bad first meeting for this guy, for her to meet this guy. And it was a bad start to the dating world. And then I say, yeah, I would say so. So I'm just completely agreeing. And Joe says, because that was the first person she went out with. So he's saying, yeah, it was such a bad introduction, a bad way to start dating on the internet, a bad first date to have with this guy who makes her pay for the food at the restaurant. It was just a bad introduction. Now, went out with. When he says, because that was the first person she went out with, what he is saying is, that was the first person she went on a date with. Went out with. For example, I remember I went out with this guy one time on our first date. I was driving and we ended up getting into a car accident. Luckily, we didn't get hurt. But it was not a good way to end our first date. Went out with. Then I go on to say, well, after laughing, well, speaking or talking of blind dates, because online dating is pretty much blind dates. Okay, blind dates or blind date. That's an idiom. That just means going out on a date with someone you've never met. blind date. So I'm saying, yeah, speaking or talking about blind dates, because it is. When you're meeting someone on the internet, that's like blind dating. An example of blind dating or blind date. I've never been on a blind date before. I've always known the person before going on the date. Blind date. Now, when I say, because online dating is pretty much blind dates, what I'm saying there, cuz is short for because. This is something else you won't see in written English, but you will hear it in conversational English. Cuz. Okay, then moving on, Joe says, yeah, agreeing with me. And then I say, or blind dating, I should say, I have a friend that I am no longer in touch with. And before we lost touch, I can remember her telling me a story about going out on a blind date. So in the beginning, I'm just correcting myself from talking about blind dates to blind dating. I'm just correcting myself. And then I'm talking about that I have this friend that I'm no longer in touch with. In touch with. Now that's an idiom meaning in contact with. I no longer have this friend I am in contact with. An example of in touch with would be, when I was living in Korea, Thailand, and Japan, I was pretty good about keeping in touch with all of my family and friends because it was so easy to email. In touch with. So I have this friend that I no longer keep in touch with, and before we lost touch is an idiom. It's the opposite of in touch with. So no longer in contact. My friend and I, we were no longer in contact with each other. Lost touch. An example of this is, it's sad to say, but I have a friend in Atlanta, Georgia, who I have not spoken to in almost 2 years. I have lost touch with her. Lost touch. So I have this friend. I am no longer in touch with her. I am no longer in contact with her. And before we lost touch, before we got out of contact with each other, I can remember her telling me a story about going on a blind date. So she didn't know the guy. And this guy, he was such a total loser. He showed up. So he showed up. He got to wherever they were meeting. He was already 2 sheets to the wind. 2 sheets to the wind, meaning he was already very drunk, or he was very drunk. He'd had a lot of alcohol to drink. This is how he shows up to the date. He was 2 sheets to the wind. For example, of 2 sheets to the wind, I had a lot to drink at a wedding a few months ago. I was 2 sheets to the wind. So this is my friend's first impression of this guy, or her first thought of him. This guy shows up. He's drunk. This guy was just trashed. Trashed meaning like 2 sheets to the wind. Very drunk. Had a lot of alcohol to drink. Trashed. An example of trashed. My friend Tim likes to drink a lot of beer. Therefore, he ends up getting trashed a lot. Moving along in the conversation, Joe says, and he stunk of alcohol? So, stunk or he smelled of alcohol? And I say, yeah. Joe says, oh, great. Now, oh, great here, he's not saying that in a good way, a positive way. He's saying it more like, oh, great. I can't believe that. And then I say, yeah, exactly. Yeah, needless to say, that date was a disaster. She didn't want to see him again. So I'm saying, yeah, needless to say, or I don't even have to say that date was a disaster. She didn't want to see him again. So disaster. It ended up badly, was not good. And she didn't want to see him again. She didn't want to go out on another date with this guy. And then Joe says, yeah, like agreeing with me. I can only imagine. I can only agree. And then I say, but yeah, I mean, she had a horrible time with dating. I'm saying she had a terrible time with dating. I mean, she went on a lot of blind dates and they were all pretty disastrous. So they were pretty terrible. Actually, but I will say before we lost touch, so before we got out of contact with each other, she finally met someone that was head and shoulders above the rest. Head and shoulders above the rest. Much better than the rest. Head and shoulders above the rest. So I'm saying my friend finally met someone that was really good. He was better than the rest. An example of this would be, my cousin is a very good hairstylist. Hairstylist is someone who cuts hair. So she cuts hair for a living. She's the only person that I'll let cut my hair. She's head and shoulders above the rest. And then Joe goes on to say, oh, that's great. Yeah. Now here he's saying, oh, that's great in a positive way. Like good. You know, it's good to hear that your friend finally met someone that she really liked. Who was really good. And I say, yeah. And then Joe says, it's funny to hear Bill speaking about all the times he's gone out on, blind dates through, that people he met over the internet. Because he's been doing it for a couple of years. And he just always has a funny spin on things when he tells a story. I don't even know where he comes up with some of this stuff. It's so funny. So Joe is talking about how it's really funny to hear his friend Bill talk about the blind dates. The dates he's gone out on. Not knowing people. Funny to hear Bill talk about these blind dates from people he's met on the internet. Because he's been doing it for a couple of years. He's been dating people from the internet for 2 years. He just always has a funny spin on things when he tells a story. Funny spin on things. That's an idiom meaning he has a funny way of looking at things. Funny spin on things. An example of that would be, Tim can really make me laugh. He has a funny spin on things whenever he talks about something. Funny spin on things. And then Joe goes on to say, yeah, he has such a funny way of looking at things. I don't even know where he comes up with some of this stuff. Like where some of these stories come from. They're just so funny. So then I go on to say, oh, that guy cracks me up. So I'm talking about Bill. Bill really cracks me up. He's got all these funny stories. Cracks me up. Makes me laugh. An example of cracks me up would be, I like when I meet people who really crack me up because I like to laugh. I love to laugh. Cracks me up. Then Joe says, yeah, I know. But I think one of his problems is the guy's like 35 and he's trying to date 20-year-olds. So he's saying, I think one reason Bill has all these funny stories, why he has all these problems when he's going on these blind dates. Bill is 35 years old and he's trying to date 20-year-olds. And I say, oh no. Like, oh, I can't believe that. And Joe says, of course there's going to be like a big difference in interests and usually maturity also. So what he's saying is a 35-year-old trying to date a 20-year-old. Some people do it, and that's fine. Other times there's, like Joe is saying, there's just can be a big difference in the interests that those two people would have. Or immaturity. Maturity being like, in this example, like, or in this situation, like their thoughts would be really different. One person being older and the other person being younger. And then I go on to say, yeah, I'm agreeing with him. That seems like it would be a recipe for disaster. Recipe for disaster. What I'm saying here is, it seems like that would be something that would likely end badly. So not end good. Recipe for disaster. An example of that would be, lying is a recipe for disaster. After someone tells a lie, something bad usually happens. A recipe for disaster. And then Joe says, yeah, I know what you're saying, so... And then I say, well, I think dating has really changed a good bit, Back in the day when our parents were dating, it was just so different. So what I'm saying is, dating has really changed a good bit. A good bit meaning a lot. For example, I drink a good bit of water throughout the day because drinking water is good for you. A good bit. So I'm saying, yeah, dating has really changed a lot. It's changed a good bit. Back in the day meaning a long time ago. For example, back in the day when my grandmother was a child, no one had TVs. No one had televisions. Back in the day. So yeah, a long time ago, back in the day, when our parents were dating, I started out saying my parents, but it's his parents too. Same generation. I'm just saying, yeah, it was just so different. So different when our parents were dating from us, people our age dating now, today. And then Joe says, oh, it was totally a different story then. So he's saying it was completely a different story then. And a different story here means not the same then. It was not the same. An example of this could be, these days, children learn how to use computers in school. Back when I was a child, it was a totally different story then. We didn't learn how to use computers. a different story. And then I go on to say, I mean, for one thing, well, moving even beyond dating, or talking about other things besides dating. Like, once people got serious, they didn't live together before they got married. And Joe says, no. And I say, like, you agree? And I start to say, and then Joe says, before I can finish, that was like viewed as a sin. So he's saying that was seen as a sin. That was something that was not good. Back when our parents were dating, after dating, when you start to get serious with someone, two people before they got married, they just would not live together. And then I say, yeah, I agree. And then Joe says, because the world, here it was a lot more, it was a much more religious time. So what he's saying is, religious time, religion, Christianity being the biggest religion in America. He's saying at that time, there were a lot of stronger Christian beliefs then. A strong Christian belief would not be for people to live together before they got married. And then I say, right, agreeing with Joe. And then I go on to say, but I'd even be willing to bet that they didn't have sex before marriage. And Joe says, he starts to say, oh, come on. Like, oh, you can't believe that. He goes on to say, I think that they were saying they didn't have sex before marriage, but I'm sure it was happening. And I say, you think? And then Joe, behind closed doors, oh, definitely. Come on, So behind closed doors, he's saying, yeah, it was happening, but it was done in private. It was not happening where people could see it. It was behind closed doors. An example of behind closed doors. Growing up, I can remember my mom not wanting people to know that she smoked. She only did it behind closed doors. Then I go on to say, well, where would they do it? So in other words, where would they have sex? Go park a car? Would they go have sex in a car? And Joe says, well, that is one, he's saying that would be one way. Yeah, I think they did actually, because back then people would live at home until they got married. So that's really, I guess they could go to a hotel, but that would be expensive. So since people lived at home until they got married, the only way to go have sex, he's saying, would be, or one way would be to go and have sex in a car. So then I say, right, agreeing with him. And then he says, so I think they would have to go. I mean, it was kind of rare. Or, didn't happen often, didn't happen very much. For someone to move out of the house before they got married. So, they probably didn't have their own apartment. So, and I say, right, agreeing with him. And he says, yeah, and and I'd start to say, well, starting to say speaking, but Joe interrupts me then. He starts to say something. Joe says, another. And then I say, I'm sorry, go ahead. So we're kind of talking both at the same time. And I'm telling Joe, oh, just go ahead. You go ahead and talk. So then Joe says, thing that was really weird. So he's saying, another thing that was really weird, or another thing that was really strange, if you think about it also, is people just didn't get divorced back then. So he's saying, if you really think about it, a really strange thing or a really weird thing is that people didn't get divorced. They didn't end their marriage back then. And I'm saying, right, agreeing with him. Then Joe says, like now, I heard something and I think this is pretty accurate. Or he's saying, I think it's pretty correct. 50% of all marriages here in the United States end in divorce. And I say, oh my God, I can't believe that. And Joe says, it's crazy he's saying it's unusual to, that you and I, we're both have parents who are still together. It's kind of, and I'm saying, I know, I agree. It is very unusual that our parents are still together. They're not divorced. And then Joe goes on to say, it's uncommon, I guess. And what he's saying is, it's not usual. And he starts to say, I guess, and I say, it is. Agreeing, again, it is uncommon. It's not usual. And then Joe goes on to say, is the word I'm looking for. Because when you look at our friends, most of them have parents that are divorced. Who are divorced, excuse me. He corrects himself. So he's saying uncommon is the word I'm looking for. It's uncommon. It's not usual. Because our friends, and this is true, most of our friends, their parents are divorced. They are no longer together. And then I say, yep, just meaning yes, a slang word for yes. Yeah, we're definitely not the norm, or our families aren't. So what I'm saying is not the norm. Our families, we're not common. We're not like everyone else. Or our families are not common. Our families are not like everyone else. For example, these days in America, it's the norm for people to start college the year after high school. The norm. And then I go on to say, but it made me think, speaking of living together, my mom, I was talking about it with her the other day, and she actually called it shacking up. Shacking up, when two people who are not married live together. That's what shacking up means. For example, my friend Kayla and her boyfriend live together. Her mom told her that she doesn't like them shacking up. Shacking up. And then Joe goes on to say, oh, that's funny. That's like a term, or that's like a word, that's no longer used. And then I end the conversation by saying, yeah, I agree. Okay, this concludes the vocabulary lesson for the conversation dating. So listen to this a few times in a relaxed way if you need to, until you have a basic understanding of the vocabulary. Then go to the mini story. See you next time. Bye. Hi, this is Kristen Dodds.
And this is Joe Weiss. And we just wanted to let you know that this material has been copyrighted in the year 2008 by Learn Real English, LLC. www.learnrealenglish.com